I think prophecy is deliberately cryptic to a large extent. Example and premise. The substitutionary death and atonement of the Messiah, King of Israel, and its purpose, I suggest, was deliberately obscured in the Old Testament. You say, well, now wait a minute. What about like Isaiah 53 and all that kind of stuff? We'll get there in a second. But I want you to think about the disciples. Do they really get this? In other words, when they have these conversations with Jesus about, well, like, Jesus will say, well, the Son of Man has come to seek and save that which is lost. The Son of Man must go up to Jerusalem and die. And they're like, what? Like, really? Don't say that. You notice that Jesus doesn't say, well, come on, you idiots. Didn't you read chapter and verse over here? Don't you get that? If it was there, they could have read it. He could have quoted it. But there's something going on here that isn't quite clear. And Jesus has to tell them. He has to sort of unlock what's going on. He has to make the connections for them. Paul calls the whole plan of salvation a mystery. Well, if you could just go look it up, what's mysterious? Paul was right. It was a mystery. Paul was pretty smart, too. He knew his Old Testament pretty well. If he couldn't figure it out, we probably couldn't either. And the disciples, we need to cut them a break, okay? There's no Old Testament prophecy that actually puts these things together. Substitutionary death. Okay, Isaiah 53. Do you realize that's probably your best bet to getting the idea of a Messiah dying? But do you realize that the word Messiah never shows up in Isaiah 53? There are only two passages in the entire Old Testament where Mashiach is used of a future eschatological figure at all. Everywhere else, it's like the living David. He's called the anointed because he's the king. Or something else is anointed. It's Mashiach. It's the same verb. The two are Psalm 2:2 and Psalm 89. Again, Psalm 2:2 gets quoted in Acts 4, Revelation 19, and there's an allusion to Psalm 89 here in 1 Peter 4. But there isn't a whole lot. And let's take Moses. Let's assume he's the author of Genesis 3:15, which, by the way, doesn't actually mention a death. The seed of the woman. All it says is that, hey, someday, Eve, you're going to have like a baby or some human being's going to come from your line and he's going to fix this problem. Doesn't talk about death, doesn't talk about blood, doesn't talk about any of that. Isaiah wrote in the 8th century. If you take the 8th century figure as writing Isaiah 53, it's the 8th century. If you do the two Isaiah thing, it's 100 years later. That's the 700s BC. Moses would have died around 1400 using round numbers. That means for 700 years, the Israelites went without the information that a messianic figure, and of course, by the way, Mashiach's not even in Isaiah 53, but they went without the idea of a messianic figure having to die. You don't get it for 700 more years. In other words, that's 3 times the time that the United States has been a country. It's a long time. So why? What's going on? Here are the references to Mashiach. You get the slides, you can see these, again, where the term occurs. Here's what I think's going on. 1 Corinthians 2, Paul says, "Yet among the mature we do impart wisdom, although it is not a wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age." It's not their wisdom, who are doomed to pass away. But we impart a secret and hidden wisdom of God, which God decreed before the ages for our glory. None of the rulers of this age understood this, because if they had, they would never have crucified the Lord of glory. They didn't know. Now, rulers here is a word I have here in red for 2 reasons. Because the word is the same in both places. Rulers, archon is the lemma. Down here, same thing. It is related to arche. And if you look at archon in Ephesians 2:2 and arche in these references, they are non-human entities. They're the cosmic bad guys. What I'm suggesting to you is God deliberately didn't give the plan in the Old Testament because the cosmic enemies that he knew would be around would have figured it out and ruined it. So what does happen when Jesus shows up? Now they know who he is. Thou art the Christ, don't kill us. Please send us over to that herd of pigs over there. And they know who he is. They don't know the plan. So they're figuring, okay, he's here. Oh, crud. Now what do we do? We've got to get rid of him. So problem solved. Let's influence somebody to kill him. Let's just bump him off somehow. We'll get the job done. We'll get rid of him, not knowing that that was the thing that needed to happen to enact everything else. Because like Paul said, had they known that, they would never have done that. Because the death of Christ is the beginning of the end for them. They didn't know. Prophecy was deliberately hidden. When Paul calls it a mystery, he's serious. Okay, he couldn't figure it out because it wasn't there. 1 Peter 1. Concerning this salvation, the prophets who prophesied about the grace that was to be yours searched and inquired carefully, and person or time the Spirit of Christ in them was indicating when he predicted the suffering. I mean, the prophets struggled with this. Like, man, what's going on here? This is kind of hard. It was revealed to them that they were serving not themselves but you. You know, you people, the ones that have the hindsight, the ones that are writing the New Testament and reading the thing. The prophets had to understand and struggle with and accept the fact that, you know what, people are only going to know what this is about when it happens. It was revealed to them that they were serving not themselves but you, and the things that have now been announced to you through those who preach the good news, that'd be us, okay? Those who preach the good news to you by the Holy Spirit sent from heaven, things into which angels long to look. Again, the verbiage there is that they were kind of scratching their heads too. God kept the plan very close to the vest for a very good reason. By the way, we seem to have this odd idea that divine beings who have free will, that somehow their loyalties are settled. We talk about a rebellion of a third of the angels, and we go to Revelation 12. If you actually read Revelation 12, it does not refer to the primeval past. It is connected with the inauguration of the kingdom, the king. How do I know that? Because the passage quotes Psalm 2. Again, look at the Old Testament. There's actually not a passage that talks about an angelic rebellion, even though we know that there are adversarial divine beings there. We don't know that more of them can't choose to be disloyal. We do have two references in Job where it says point blank, God does not trust his holy ones. So sometimes, even with crucial doctrinal ideas, God makes the revelation deliberately cryptic. So interpretation is, in an ultimate sense, or even in a significant sense, unknowable until hindsight. So again, that should really give us pause and should produce some caution in us about our talk about the future, our talk about end times.